Hi, everyone. After listening to Chasing Indy and also a couple of other people regarding the New Mexico tourism video that Forrest did back in 2015, for those of you not aware, Jack posted that on his YouTube channel back in December of 2020. The version that he posted is unedited, and it's the full DVD that he received back from the producer. So anyway, I think it was February of 2019. I'm not sure. He mentions it in the comment on the video, but it's on his YouTube channel if you want to go and watch the full thing. Also, there's a short 2.5 minute teaser video that the New Mexico Tourism Bureau used, and I want to point some things out about that. But in any case, I went back and I listened to that whole video to try to find maybe a slip up or anything odd that Forrest Fenn mentioned. And to be honest with you, there's not really much in there that you probably already haven't heard. He emphasized the same things that he normally did. Jack had said himself, though, that in that video, there are no slip ups that are going to help you with the poem. So, in other words, that he didn't post that, meaning that there's a slip up in there. In any case, Chasing Indy watched it, and she pointed out a couple of things that were in there. And I decided to go and take a look at that video and come up with my own comments on interesting things that I found in it. Over here, you'll see a timestamp. That's at what time in the video. So, anyway, before I read this, I want to let you know that it might seem weird the way I wrote it, but when I translated this, I actually put in hyphens or ellipsis, dot, 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 where Forrest kind of paused or changed his train of thought. And remember that this is unedited footage that we're looking at here. Anyway, here we go. At 14 minutes and 5 seconds, they ask Forrest, "So why did you use a poem?" Forrest said, "When I hid the treasure chest, I hid the treasure chest before I knew what I was going to do with it. But I needed a vehicle to so that people, I needed a vehicle that would tell people where the treasure chest is if they could figure it out. And I told myself the best way to do that is to write a poem. So I wrote the poem, and I think that there is 24 stanzas, maybe. And yeah, he actually said 24 stanzas. Obviously, he meant 24 lines. I don't remember, but there are 9 clues in that poem. If you could follow the clues starting at the first one, they will take you to the treasure." The next question he was asked, and this follows right after that. Wherever you don't see a timestamp, that means it just keeps going. So are the clues like are they like what's the word I'm looking for? Are they like misleading or like twisted, or are they just like clear? Can you say that? I don't think these interviewers are that bright, but anyway, I digress. So Forrest comes back. He says, "There is no subterfuge in the poem. Everything is straight, and to the tendency with thousands of people that are searching, they tend to overcook the poem. I tell people to read the book and then study the poem 4, 5, 6, 8, 10 times, and then go back and read the book again slowly, looking for hints in the text that will help you solve the clues in the poem. That's the way to do that. But you have to know where to start. If you don't have the starting point, you don't have anything. And I've said the treasure is hidden in the Rocky Mountains, somewhere north of Santa Fe." So again, he's just reiterating the fact that you have to study the poem. You have to figure out where the starting point is. So they ask him the next question. By the starting point, you mean the starting point in the book or the starting point in the and Forrest cuts him off and he goes, "In the poem. You need to know where the first you need to know where the first clue is in the poem. You have to find that spot. From then on, it is academic." I just want to say again that Forrest is always hinting that you have to know the starting point. It's extremely important that you study the poem and figure out the clues. And this is prior to even going to a map. You have to figure out where to start. That is the reason why we came up with the try to wheel stuff. The poem, First Pass, in our opinion, tells you or confirms the precise starting location. he's giving you a location, the wheel in that case, and that's where you start. You apply everything that the poem says at the wheel. Essentially, he's giving you a huge hint, just like the first stanza does. It's telling you that inside the poem, in plain sight, he is going to actually reveal his secret where, meaning where warm water salt. He confirms it and gives it in the poem. And if you don't have that starting point, you're wasting your time. 2435, Forrest Fenn. And this is after he was being asked to describe the chest contents. That was the last thing I put in the treasure chest. He's talking about the bracelet here. And the thought came to me when I put that in the treasure chest and closed the lid. The thought came to me, that a little part of me is in the treasure chest also. That too goes on to what I said, that when you're reading the first stanza, that's actually him speaking from within inside the treasure chest. In other words, he went alone in there and he is with his treasures bold. Literally, he's in the chest. So the chest is talking to you in the poem. Then at 2533, Forrest Fenn says, and I took, and then he paused and he says, I pulled a couple of my hairs and I put those in the jar because, if that thing is found 1,000 or 10,000 years from now, maybe they will want to do some DNA tests or carbon 14 or whatever. And they will find out who this idiot was that did this outrageous thing. 2557 question. Are you worried that the chest is like out there getting wet, weathered, or answer? I know that it's wet. I mean, I never did say that I buried it. That doesn't mean that it isn't buried. But if something is in the Rocky Mountains, I mean, how is it not going to get wet? It gets rained on in the summer time, even if it was buried, it's going to get wet. And if it's not buried, it's going to get cold and wet with the snow and whatever. So I know the thing is wet, but I was careful. I tried to think of those things. There's a couple of bracelets in there. One of those bracelets has steel hinge on it. I knew that it was going to rust. So I put a couple of Ziplocs. And I don't know what the life expectancy is of a Ziploc, but it's certainly not 1,000 years. But anyway, I did what I could. I mean, there's so many things to think about. And one thing that was paramount in my mind was that I didn't want to go home and say, oh, geez, I forgot about that. It's too late for, oops. So Forrest Fenn, they asked him about when he got cancer. And the last thing he said, if I got to go, who said I can't take it with me? And that's when I got the idea to hide the treasure chest. Sure, I could take it with me. Now, that's a little bit different than the story that we heard before, where he talks about Ralph Lauren. In any case, he's telling you that he could take it with him when he goes. 3315, Forrest Fenn. I want to die in the mountains or along a stream or something. I said dying is very personal. It's something you have to do all by yourself. And to be frank about it, I don't want anybody watching. So I told myself, I'm going to write this poem. I'm going to hide this treasure. And with my last, if I have another terminal illness, my last dying gasp will be to go out there and where the treasure is and take my own life on my own terms. That's important to me. And then he paused for a long time. And then he says, the problem was I got well and ruined the story, but I could still hide the treasure chest. And that was 1988. And I'm still around and kicking, and I'm mostly vertical now. So again, he's discussing. Now remember, Jack said that he figured out where Forrest wants to die, and that the poem tells the story essentially of how he would go to the place and kill himself. And this, of course, is reflecting that information. But again, this is really nothing that we never knew. And this interview was in 2015. So a lot of the stuff he had said previously, but I don't really see any slip ups yet. There are some interesting things again for those people that are just looking at a map and they refuse to realize that you can't just look at a map. You have to decipher the clues first. You have to know where to start. Keeps emphasizing that over and over. You got to figure out the clues before you even get to the point of going to a map. Rushing to a map is not the way you're going to solve it. And to me, all that stuff is hinting at the fact that he's telling you where to start right in a poem. And I don't mean where warm waters halt. I mean, he describes where warm water salts are, or at least how to discover it in the poem itself, right in front of your eyes. But people just refuse to look at that. And instead, they're just naming random locations like Madison Junction without having anything but their own personal bias to back it up. So when you could get the poem to actually tell you where to go, to me, that's a lot more stronger and a lot more unbiased than somebody just saying, well, because these are two guys are fed rivers and it's warm water, that's bias. It's just like the fact that Forrest did bathe in the fire hole, but none of that stuff was mentioned in The Thrill of the Chase. That was made in later books. So the poem is supposed to stand on its own. So technically, we shouldn't even know about Yellowstone. We shouldn't know about him being a fisherman. We shouldn't know that he was an art dealer. We shouldn't know any of that stuff. None of that backstory is required. So I wouldn't use that as a crutch to try to reinforce a solution. That's setting you off on being exposed to your own personal bias, right? You've got to get the poem to direct you exactly where you are. And I want to mention something to Rodney that I talked about last night on chat room with him. Yes, Jack emailed me. I mean, I emailed Jack a couple of questions. And one of the questions I asked him is it still possible to prove a solution without the chest being there? And Jack replied to, yes, it's possible, given that the evidence that you're going to see when you have the correct solution and also boots on the ground. So I replied to Jack again, and I said, can you clarify? Are you really telling me that it's possible to prove a solution even now after everything that he said? And he came back and he says, yes. Now, what he means by evidence, I don't know, but this is what he told me. So apparently, it's still possible to prove it. In other words, the solution is going to be so obvious, or the poem is going to say something back to you that's going to make it hard to debate that it's wrong. It should be extremely straightforward, and the poem should tell you everything that you need. None of this, well, I look at this clump of rocks and it looks like an elephant. Or I look at this clump of trees and it looks like an omega. No, that's completely subjective. You could show a picture of the ground to 50 different people, and you're probably going to get 50 different responses back. Not to mention the fact that a couple of beetles could go in there and wipe out an entire forest a year after Forrest hit the chest. That's not something that's long lasting. He's not going to do something like that. So it's silly to look at a group of trees. Your solution has to be more substantial than that. There can't be any room for any kind of guessing. He says that it leads you precisely to the location. He doesn't say that it leads you to a spot that's 1,000 feet by 1,000 feet, and you got to go in there and spend 20 days wandering up and down the streams. He said you're going to go there. You're going to go there with confidence and go directly to it. So if your solve is not capable of producing an exact location, then it's wrong. Anyway, so they go back to him at 35 minutes. Can you just explain what was your motivation for hiding this in a beautiful place or the Rocky Mountains or relationship with nature? Answer. When I decided to hide that treasure chest, I knew exactly where I was going to put it. It's in a place that's very dear to me, and I don't want to get too far into that, but because it will give you a time frame that And that's a clue that I just don't want to reveal. But there was never a second choice. But I will say that the person that finds the treasure chest is somebody that's going to figure out the clues and he's going to go to it. Nobody's going to happen upon it. And I mean, nobody's going to find it out on a Sunday afternoon picnic or during spring break. I mean, they're going to have to they're going to have to earn it. But I've also said that I believe this with all my heart. The person that finds the treasure chest and puts it on their lap and raises that lid for the first time, they're going to either going to start crying or they're going to start laughing or they're going to collapse. One of those three. It's such a visual sight. Emeralds, sapphires, rubies, and gold, the antiques, the jade, carved, carved jade. It's pretty atrocious when you get right down to it. So again, he's just discussing more about you're going to have to do some work to solve this. It's not going to be an overnight thing. It's not as simple as I'm going to go online and look for places synonymous with warm water halting because it doesn't matter what you think warm water is. It doesn't matter what you think halt means. None of that matters what we think. What matters is what Forrest thinks. And more importantly, what the poem is telling you. We shouldn't have to do any research, including the thrill of the chase. You shouldn't have to do any of that. The only thing you should have to do is solve the poem. And in order to solve the poem, the only thing you should need is a map. And basically, when you go to a location at that map, anything that you need to solve it should be of historically significant enough that it's not going to change in 1,000 years. In other words, it could be a famous spot that's documented with a kiosk or some kind of a plaque or something like that. Or it's in, but it's got to be in information that's available to the tourist that's at that place. It can't be any research at all because he said none was required. So, in other words, the historical background of location is probably not even relevant unless, and this is an important thing, unless the significance of it is mentioned on site. For example, if you were looking in Yellowstone, it would have to be something that's documented in Yellowstone that's historically significant. Just like when you're at the wheel, the fact that it was created 12,000 years ago is significant. But it's not a guess and it didn't require any research other than going to the wheel and looking at a kiosk and reading the information. And quite honestly, in Yellowstone and at the wheel or wherever, if it's a really historically relevant place, the information's available at home. So you don't even really need to be there. But in the case of the wheel, it is important that you're not just going to the wheel. You're doing what he said. You're using the wheel. In other words, what he's doing is he made the poem work in collusion with information that you're going to find on site wherever that may be. So if it was at Fishing Bridge, the clue in the poem is going to be somehow related to the historical information that's available at Fishing Bridge on site as a tourist. If it has something to do with the medicine wheel, then you're going to be using the medicine wheel in a way that the natives would have used it as described on site. So that is no research required outside of the poem and going to the physical place. And he's laid that out here many, many, many times. So they ask him at 3640 here, in the course of your life, what role has nature played in in your life? I mean, obviously fishing, all your exploration. I mean, what is your relationship with nature? Well, that part has nature played during my life. Well, I don't know for sure, but I think I was born looking out of a window, and I never stopped looking out of that window. And in high school, I sat by the fire escape, and that window was open when the weather was good. and the teacher wasn't looking, I could climb through that window, slide down the old fire escape. I mean, the lure of the smell of freedom was so, it superseded anything that teachers had to teach me. And that's why I made D's and F's in all of my, I think I graduated because my father was a principal. But nevertheless, I never felt like like they had anything for me. They surely didn't have anything that would command my attention. This one Spanish teacher said, Forrest, don't you know anything? And I said, well, Miss Ford, I don't even suspect anything. And then the bell rang and I got out of there. I just pointed this one out because this is a reference to the learning curve in Thrill of the Chase, where he teaches us how to do the sliding trick, and also where he's alone. The first place, the only place in the Thrill of the Chase that you'll find Forrest Fenn in the book alone. We're getting near the end here. It's 39 minutes, 31 seconds. Can you give us something that will help people? You know, a 10th, 11th, or 12th clue? Can you tell us someplace the treasure isn't buried? Answer. Well, the treasure is not buried where you're going to find it. That's the first thing. Now, I want to stop right there because I want to point that out. Read that back to yourself. That's exactly what he said. And after I read that, that immediately made me think that the treasure chest is not where the poem takes you. In other words, it goes back to my proxy idea. And it also goes back to that might be why Forrest Fenn had to go. I mean, that might be why Jack had to go to Santa Fe. There could be a legal document in one of the bells or something that is at the ninth clue that you find. And in order to take ownership of the treasure chest, you have to do what that document tells you to do. And what I believe and what I've said many times, and I was the first one to say it, and I also said it on AGK in 2018, the same time that I believe that Jack was probably watching and calling in to AGK. He's seen that. So anyway, if he's the finder of the chest, then obviously he knows about that now. But when you read that again, I mean, look, well, the treasure is not buried where you're going to find it. Okay, so stop right there. It's not buried where I'm going to find it. So what is it? Am I finding something else? I mean, like he said, that's the first thing. The treasure is not buried where you're going to find it. So in other words, I'm going to find a proxy and the treasure's just buried in New Mexico. Maybe. I don't know. But that's the reason why I called that out. And then he says, but people have asked me for clues, and sometimes it's just hard for me to say no. The first clue I gave was this lady in Minneapolis called me on the phone and she said, you have to help me out. Give me another clue. I said, okay, I'll give you another clue. And I said, the treasure is more than 300 miles away west of Toledo. She said, thank you. And then he laughed and he said, she thought I really helped. I'm going to go on a little bit of a rant here. And that's the only reason why I put this one here. And before I go on that rant, let me say that if you there's some stuff that I skipped over, but like because Chasing India already mentioned it. If you notice back earlier in these things, Forrest said that the hints are in the text. You know, go back on my video and you'll see it. He says the hints in the book are in the text. But then later on, he contradicts himself and he also mentions the pictures. And I believe Gandhi caught that. I didn't put it in here because she already mentioned it. And honestly, I'm just trying to find things that nobody else found. And there's really nothing in here, just like Jack said, other than the fact that in many times he's hinting that how important the first clue is, how important it is to study the poem, how important it is to know where warm water's salt, how important it is that a part of him is in the chest with his treasures. Maybe that's why Jack put this out there. I don't know. But there's really nothing else in here. And he himself said that you're not going to find anything in there that's going to help you with the poem. So in other words, the slip up that he made is not in this video at all. And I believe that it's in the other video. If you go back and look, the video I did with Lorraine Mills, I think that's where he slipped up. In any case, let's get on with this. And this pisses me off. And I hate the media. Okay. I understand why they do this. There's sensationalism, clickbait. They're trying to draw attention here. But they basically set Forrest up. If you listen to what the guy says at 43 minutes, 32 seconds, they're telling Forrest what to do. They're telling him to essentially lie and say that he said something in there that he wished he hadn't said. Now, if you remember, this video is also the video where he mentions opinion nuts. And Forrest Fenn later corrected that. He goes, no, he goes, it's opinion nuts, pine nuts, same thing. He said, I just want to let you know that wasn't a clue. Now, if you browse the internet from 2015 for this video, you're going to find an article that came out a few months after the video was released. And in there, Forrest Fenn himself told the guy that there are really no clues in there. He said that. So he's instructed right here to lie by the media. Okay. So they ask him right here, and I'm going to read everything in here is exactly the way they worded it, right? It's not really a question, but what we want to do is end this with, honestly, you saying, I've already said too much, and make people think somewhere in what you've already delivered in this interview. Of course, that's my remark. There was a clue, but not, a poetic delivery is essentially what we're trying to say. Like, if you've never told people that the treasure is wet, the clue is already there. You understand what I'm saying? Does that make sense? In other words, they're telling them to lie and say something that makes the viewer think that he basically slipped up and said something he hadn't said. And the only thing that's a general consensus about this video is the thing about the opinion nuts. And now we've already proven that the chest was in Wyoming. And there are opinion nuts in Wyoming, just different type though, but not the opinion nuts that everybody else is talking about. So if you're going to believe Forrest that this chase was not a hoax, and you're going to believe the court affidavit that it was in Wyoming, then obviously Forrest is not lying when he said that there are no hints in there. That was an honest slip up. And the only reason why he said they said in the video that Forrest slipped up and dropped the hint was because that's their marketing thing. That's how they want to try to push the video. The media lies. And as I'm going to show you, that's how they do constructive editing. I'll show you in a minute, where they can basically make it look like Forrest said something that he didn't say. Now, I mean, all of the media does this, so I'm not just picking on them, but it's so blatantly obvious, especially considering all the things that have been going on in the political arena, that the media is not to be trusted. And remember now, Jack did a lot of work with the media. So for all we know, when he was at the Onion and stuff, before he got interested to actually become a searcher, they were looking at ways to capitalize off of this treasure hunt. And maybe that's what annoyed Forrest Fenn, because he knew what was going on. I know he knew what was going on here. Just go watch the video, and you can tell he's kind of getting annoyed, but he goes along with it because, hey, any news is good news. He's trying to sell books. He's trying to get people out there. But this nonsense, it really annoys me that, and people are so stupid. They'll watch TV or especially a documentary or some other nonsense, and they believe what they see as if that's actually what the person said, when no, 9 times out of 10, it was probably distorted to reflect what the producer wants to say, not what Forrest wants to say. And this is a clear example of that. So Forrest goes back, and of course he obliges, and he does what they ask for. He says, well, and not only does he do it once, he does it twice, but I didn't get into all that here. He goes, well, you've asked me a lot of questions, and most of them I answered, and a few I haven't. But I got to tell you, there was one thing I told you that I wish I had not. And then he's like, how was that? And they're like, okay, that was perfect. Of course, you don't see that. You see that in the raw footage here, but you're not going to see that in the final video. And let me show you exactly what I'm talking about. Here's a 2 minute and 38 second reel that was basically, a promo for the full 49-minute video. And I stopped it at a specific spot. I want you to hear the way they distorted what Forrest said at that point. Watch.
Well, you've asked me a lot of questions, and most of them I've answered, a few I haven't, but I got to tell you, there's one thing I told you that I wish I had not. Well, I think there are a lot of people out looking for the treasure. When they get home, they find out they enjoyed something better.
See? Now remember, if you watch this here, watch this same short, you can see the link up here. I'll put it in the description down below. But anyway, you can watch this short version. If you want the full interview uncut that I looked at, go to Jack's YouTube channel and you'll find it there. That's actually the only place you're going to find it now. But that's the footage that he got directly from the director back in 2019, February, I think. He explains it on his YouTube channel, so go check it out. But boy, does this stuff annoy me. It really annoys me when they do that. But in this video, that's where he mentions the opinion nuts. You'll hear it. But the way they distorted it, it really makes it look like what they settled on, the producer, is trying to direct you to the opinion nuts comment. Now, you know why he was trying to do that? I'll tell you why. Who's doing the video? The New Mexico Tourism Bureau of Tourism. They're trying to get you to go to New Mexico. They don't want you up in Yellowstone. So, of course, they're going to talk about pinion nuts when they're going to mention something that's in there. They wanted to get that part, And luckily, Forrest later clarified it. He basically said pinion nuts have nothing really to do with it. And then he clarified it again. If you Google it, you find the article that came out in 2015 where he said that there were no hints in this video, which is essentially the same thing Jack said. So really, people, I don't see what the point is in trying to backdoor everything and follow Jack around and just, solve the poem. If your solution is so compelling, it should be proven there. This is what Jack is saying. Right? If you want to try to figure out where it was, then at the start with solve the poem. This stuff of listening to Dal give you some bullshit about an email that he had, and this and that. That's not going to get you anywhere. It's not going to help you prove anything. As a matter of fact, it even makes your solve look more stupid. Because what it tells me is that you're not smart enough to get your solution to work with just the poem. So now what you're doing is you're out there looking at everything other than the poem to try to force fit a location in there that is wrong. And it's just become laughable at this point now. It's so obvious there that there's a couple of YouTube channels that are trying to get some kind of a documentary deal. It just makes me laugh. If anybody out there that's doing documentaries, is listening to this, I mean, just take heed. You keep going to the same 5 or 6 people, but you fail to realize that those 5 or 6 people never found anything. So what the hell are you listening to them for? They have nothing to say. They're giving you these opinions, and it's just all laughable. It's all based on hearsay, based on emails, based on Freedom of Information Act, based on, scrapbooks, based on this, based on everything but the poem. So these people are failures. Why on earth would you go to somebody that failed and give them money for their story? I mean, if you really want to pay somebody, the only person that deserves anything would be the person with the chest. That's the only person that could prove where he got the chest, right? I mean, everybody else is just telling you what they think. So if you're doing a documentary, instead of just focusing on those same idiots over and over again, why don't you just take a good look around you and maybe look at all of the solutions that are out there that you come upon and make a list of ones that you think are compelling and do a documentary about that. And by the way, in no way am I talking about myself. All I'm saying, and it's not just me. It's not just me. There are other people that have good solves. But it's crazy how they keep looking at these same, and I'm not going to name those people because we all know who they are. Just look at every documentary that ever existed, and it's the same handful of people that are essentially have nothing, nothing. All they're trying to do is bleed and milk as much money out of this Chase and the Forrest Fenn name that they can. They don't help the community. They don't provide anything good to the community. They're not providing anything other than bullshit and controversy. So seriously, I mean, if you want to do a good documentary, focus on the facts, not the bullshit. Maybe then somebody will start taking the media seriously. Until then, it's really just a big fucking joke. Anyway, people, I've said enough. Peace.